Waterloo Region. 570 News proudly presents Business to Business. Here's your host, Glenn Pelletier.
And good evening and welcome to a brand new show on 570 News. It is my pleasure to be hosting Business to Business with the presidents of the two chambers of commerce, the two main ones in Waterloo Region, the only chambers of commerce, if you put it that way, the Greater KW and the Cambridge Chambers of Commerce. President of the Greater Kitchener-Waterloo Chamber of Commerce, Ian McLean, welcome aboard.
Thank you for having us.
And Greg DeRocher, President of the Cambridge Chambers of Commerce. A lot has been said, Ian, about your anniversary this year, your 125th. And Greg, your origins go back to the Galt Board of Trade in the mid-1920s. Both organizations have been around for a very long time.
So have we.
Let's start off the show by talking about chambers of commerce in general, what it is that you do, and the significance of chambers of commerce to the local business community.
Well, I'll just start. We're very pleased to celebrate 125 years, and the origins of our chamber go back to the village of Berlin in 1887, which we just ran the numbers on, and it actually was 1887. But it's really been interesting in looking back at the history of what chambers do. It's been chamber members who have been political leaders, leaders of not-for-profits, charitable organizations. So they've been leaders for 125 years, I know, in Kitchener, in our chamber, as well as Cambridge, in growing all of the institutions across the community. So when you look at hospitals, universities, artistic organizations, it's been business leaders that have been there at the forefront saying a healthy community means a healthy business environment. So for me, that's one of the things, that it's not just business, it's a healthy community and a growing community that helps make a prosperous business environment.
I think Glenn, Ian hit the nail right on the head. You know, in 1599, back in Marseille, France, when chambers of commerce first came to life, they were all about trade and fighting government or working with government to try and come up with laws that affected positive trade and economic growth. And I think now we've become vital community organizations that we touch all four corners of a community. And I think, Ian and I have both recognized that, and certainly we know that it's critically important to get out business's message, not just to business. Business understands it. We need to get that message out to the broader community as well.
So give me an insight into what actually happens inside a chamber of commerce at a meeting. Who are the members? What are you trying? Is it a gigantic network of business professionals that are trying to assist each other, or how does it?
Chambers of commerce. It's predominantly the larger institutions, companies within your community are really supporters of the chamber, and the chamber maybe seemingly does very little for them. Although what we do is we work with those small businesses, those under 20 employee organizations, to try and build the strength in those organizations, and that really feeds those larger corporations in the community. So while, a lot of people would probably look at a chamber of commerce as maybe being the representative of the local dry cleaner or the small restaurant, we're not. We're drivers of the entire economic base, and that's where what we do to build that strength. So while predominantly our membership, and I think Ian would probably say the same thing, our probably 70 to 80% of our membership are the under 20 employers in town. We really recognize the importance of those individuals and trying to connect them, because what we want is to see them at 200 and 300 and 400 employees, and we can be that bridge of connection.
So really, it's a bringing together, if you will, of and connecting people so that they thrive. Is that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess to take a step back, I mean, the chambers of commerce represent all of business. So we represent all the sectors: manufacturing, education, government, financial institutions, insurance companies, and small business. So we represent. So as an example, in the Greater KW Chamber, we have about over 1,700 members, and Greg has almost 1,900. And we represent the entire business community. So, and it goes right across all those sectors. And I guess, what do chambers do? I mean, for us, and Greg's will be maybe different wording, but we advocate on behalf of all of business, saying what are the things that are required for businesses to thrive and grow and prosper, create jobs and economic wealth. What are the things that they need to know to get there? So we're not only advocating to the community as a whole, but other levels of government. educating people, saying, what do you need to know about taxes? What do you need to know about how to reduce your costs, be more profitable? Networking is always a big thing. How do we bring businesses together and say, we have events of all different sizes. Some of them are smaller, like peer-to-peer groups where people talk through specific issues. Some of them are larger, and we've done some of the hits on, and Greg has his big Excellence Awards dinner upcoming. We've just had ours. We've also had Frank McKenna come a couple of weeks ago and had 300 or 400 people in a room. We'll have the Governor of the Bank of Canada, which
Mark
we'll have
Carney.
Mark Carney and Greg and his members will be coming to that event. So, there's that networking piece, and then there's all the other things that we do to try and help ourselves. So what's the value of membership? And we both have member rewards programs where we say, because we can get working together, we're stronger as a whole. We have programs that try and save people money, create opportunities for them to be more efficient, effective, and grow their business. So those are the types of things that chambers do, and we try and do all of those things all the time.
I think as well we try and connect as well the charities and not-for-profits with business. We all know, and what we've tried to do, and I know the Greater KW Chamber does the exact same thing, but what the Cambridge Chamber has really tried to work with the nonprofits and charities in Cambridge is to say, you know what, a really strong and vibrant economy in the local municipality is going to drive your business and and the operation that you're trying to do to create that social harmony within the community. So we know that the Chamber of Commerce needs to play that vital role between the social fabric in the community and the pure economics as well. And I know both of our chambers work very hard to bring those together.
You guys are working together on this particular show,
sort of,
and in other ventures.
Yep.
Is this rare to see two chambers like this working together? How significant is it that you're working together? To try and help each other as a whole.
Well, I think the first point would be that what chambers are across the country. There's over 400 across Canada, and in Ontario there's 175 or thereabouts. So it's a network of chambers of commerce. I think what's unique is that I think if people across the region always get the impression that there's Cambridge and then there's Kitchener and Waterloo, and no one from any community work together, whether it's politically or otherwise. And I think we just said, what's important to business in Cambridge is important to business in Kitchener, Waterloo, and Woolwich Township and North Dumfries. Those issues are pretty common, and we personally get along very well, and said it's important for us to send the signal that we're working together for the betterment of the business community as a whole. And so there's no reason that we shouldn't work together, because I think we give a broader voice. And I mean, Greg has the stats, but I think we're the 6th and 7th largest chambers in the country. Not just Ontario, in the country. So together, when we put that together, we have the type of voice that competes with the Edmontons and the Calgarys and the Winnipegs, Vancouvers, and that's pretty important for us as a region.
I think part of it too, Glenn, is the fact that we do get along. I'm a very tolerant individual, so I can. but I think we've also understood that while geographically the region might be expansive, from a business perspective, we're one community, and we need to work together more at speaking as one voice, because putting our membership together at 3,800 members is a pretty powerful voice at any level of government.
All right, we're going to come back with more. Don't go away. You're listening to Business on 570 News with our guests, Ian McLean, President and CEO of the Greater KW Chamber of Commerce, and Greg DeRocher, President, CEO of the Cambridge Chamber of Commerce. We're going to come back and talk about something that you guys are going to be doing in May, a couple of resolutions you're going to be submitting to the Ontario Chamber Conference meeting in May. And don't go away, because John Tory, the former PC party leader, former CFL commissioner, John Tory will be weighing in on the Drummond Report. And we want to talk a lot about the Drummond Report on the show.
You betcha.
This is Business to Business on 570 News.
Business to Business, presented by 570 News. Watch the live video webcast at 570news.com. We'll return with more Business to Business. Connecting business, featuring local business, solutions, and success stories. Connecting community through business. Here on 570 News.
And welcome back to Business, the debut show on 570 News. I'm Glenn Pelletier, and our regular guests on Business to Business, Greg DeRocher, President and CEO of the Cambridge Chamber of Commerce. Ian McLean, President and CEO of the Greater Kitchener-Waterloo Chamber of Commerce. John Tory will be joining us just after 6:30, the former leader of the Ontario Progressive Conservative Party, with a real mind for business. Well, for those that don't know, Ian McLean's father, of course, the former member of Parliament for Waterloo, Walter McLean, and through your connections within the party, you got to know John a little bit, and we're delighted to have Mr. Tory on. He knows a thing or two about economics.
Absolutely, and I was very fortunate to have him. He was out at Capacity Waterloo Region speech earlier this week, and so I had a brief chat with him. So I'm very pleased he'll come on and share with us. As he said, he's not encumbered with being a politician anymore, so he's going to give us his frank assessment of what he thinks
that'll
should be
good.
done.
Yeah,
well, we're going to get into it with John because I know you guys want to talk a lot about the Drummond Report. 362 recommendations, and he did not hold back. We're not quite Greece 2012, but Greece
we'll be there.
Greece in 1984 went through something similar to what we're experiencing now, so it can happen, and eventually you have to bite the bullet, and we'll get into that in a moment because you have some really great things to say about what government has to do and what business has to do to get ourselves out of the potential for economic woes that we're not even close to European levels, and let's cross our fingers for that. Okay, in May, the Ontario Chamber Conference is being held. Tell us what you're doing together with the Guelph Chamber.
Yeah, so last year, every spring, the Ontario Chamber of Commerce has an annual meeting. There's many resolutions get put forward by member chambers. And last year we worked together, Greg and I, who we just got to know each other, but we're at the conference and said, Greg was helping me understand what the secret handshake was at the Ontario Chamber Conference. But we worked on a resolution that was passed by the conference on the importance of post-secondary education and infrastructure and those things, because we know how much of an economic driver it is. So this year we've got a couple more, and we're working together.
Well, advanced manufacturing and manufacturing in general is critically important to Ontario. We've lost a lot of jobs during the recession since 2008. And I think, from Ian's perspective and my perspective, what we understand is that, everybody says it. Every politician says it. Even the Premier says it. We got to do something to drive manufacturing back to Ontario and uplift and bring it back to its once strong dominance in the province. But there's little attention made by a specific ministry. And we had put a resolution forward last year at the AGM to develop a ministry of manufacturing. The argument from the naysayers at the time was, well, you want government to build this new bureaucracy. Well, what we're suggesting now with this resolution, and we've had some help with those who are very proficient with the secret handshake. But what we've been
what's funny? Oddly, you guys do look like Fred and Barney.
That's right.
It's amazing.
That's right.
Well, what we've done now is we've refined that motion, Glenn, to now suggest that a minister must be responsible for manufacturing. So what we're asking the Ontario Chamber of Commerce to do is to put forward a resolution to the Premier to suggest that manufacturing, there must be a minister in charge of the manufacturing. So it's not a broad spectrum across several ministries, that there's actually someone in charge with developing a strategy. What
about the current bailiwick of the Ministry of Industry?
But that's part of the problem.
How do you guys want to differentiate?
If you went to if any of our manufacturers who want to either expand or grow or come to the province wanted to say, who do I go and talk to in the Ontario government? And I think this is one of the problems with government, and we both Greg and I have been elected officials and city councils, so we sort of have a feel for this a little bit. Is if you went and asked who's the one person responsible for manufacturing, you'd have the Minister of Finance and the Minister of Economic Development and Minister of Labor. You could go down the list. You'd probably have 7 or 8 ministries. And all we had said last year and are saying again this year is the Drummond Report really spells out that what's happening is the long-term trajectory we're on is going to lead us to economic to huge deficits and a real decline in our economy. advanced manufacturing, which is building on the strengths we have here as a region, such as the technologies that come out of our startups. The way that we're going to compete in manufacturing is going to be in those advanced, high-skilled, high educational type jobs, like in food processing, which Greg can talk about. So that resolution really speaks to saying, we don't want a ministry, but we want to know when we have someone here or from anywhere across the province that wants to that has issues around manufacturing, who do they talk to? And right now, there is no such answer. So we've simplified it to say, tell us what it is, and come up with a strategy on how we're going to create those jobs.
You've made the point so clearly, and I can tell you, I just Googled Ontario Industry Minister, and I've got 3 or 4 different descriptions of that particular jurisdiction.
Exactly. And
Ministry of Economic Development and Innovation, Industry Canada, Minister of State for Science and Technology, and on and on and on. There's no definitive face.
And that's the problem.
So when you guys want to go advocate, if you do want to advocate on behalf of business,
absolutely.
Who do you take your case to?
Absolutely. The real important thing to remember here, Glenn, is in high tech, we both love high tech. Our communities are consumed with high tech. But are we becoming a society of thinkers and not doers? Because that manufacturing process, that implementation aspect of the technology sector is going abroad. What we need to do is have a ministry focused on retaining the doers in this province and attracting more doers.
And I think over the last number, actually since June, I've been interviewed several times with respect to the ups and downs that RIM's having. And one of the things I'd really point out to a lot of the media that call in from outside is how diverse our economy is. And I think we sometimes forget that ourselves here. Manufacturing is still 25% of our regional economy.
Absolutely.
And you know what? Those jobs have great multiplier, and it creates those or it uses the technologies that are created to become more efficient, the streamlining of processes, those sorts of things. So we're no longer a country that should be hewers of wood and drawers of water. I mean,
the danger too, Ian, is once you start perceiving your economy as solely green energy or high tech, you ignore the possibility of being a manufacturing sector, and those jobs get parceled out either to different provinces or to different countries. Well, and that's really what we're trying to prevent.
If you want a sustainable economy, you have the type of economy we have here. So kudos go to the previous businesses or business leaders of the community, as well as political leaders and others that have built the economy the way it is to the way it is today. But as Greg would say, I mean, advanced manufacturing is it's companies that people wouldn't identify. So
no.
Maybe you tell them what especially in Cambridge.
Well, you look at even ComDev, for example. A lot of people think that ComDev is this high tech, that a lot of filled with thinkers. They're not. They manufacture on that premises, and these are engineers. These are highly skilled individuals that are involved in advanced manufacturing. So Toyota, for example. You got to go through an awful lot of training in order to work on the assembly line process of building a Corolla, a Matrix, or a Lexus in TMMC. So that's advanced manufacturing as well. But I think in reality, what a lot of people don't realize is one manufacturing job, and I think the statistic is something like one manufacturing job will create 2.3 other sector jobs, commercial sector jobs. When we lose a Schneider's, it impacts more than the 12 or 1,400 that are going to be gone. It impacts, the multiplier is like 2.5 or 3 times. It's critically important we develop those jobs. We have a concerted effort in doing that. I think Communitech's doing a great job of working with the high-tech sector. Yep. So Ian and I have said, what we have to do is we have to get behind and start the steamroller going to bring advanced manufacturing into this community in a big way.
And we have when I talk to our colleagues across the province, and when we go to the conference last year, everyone is just they all kind of stop and say, "Boy, you guys are so lucky to be where you are." Because many of our colleagues are one industry towns, or when something goes down in St. Thomas or something, when a plant shuts, there's nothing else.
Okay, briefly before Mr. Tory joins us, your second resolution that you want to present in May to the Ontario Chamber Conference Annual General Meeting involves Highway 7.
This is a quick
Highway
one.
7, and I can tell you right now, having said Highway 7, people are all ears right now. What have you got to say, gentlemen?
Hasn't been talked about maybe enough on 570 News? Because let's just get on with it, for crying out loud. It's been adopted. Everybody's bought into the fact the need has certainly been established. I think our friend Lloyd Longfield over at the Guelph Chamber of Commerce has worked diligently on this as well, and is certainly supporting this. Lloyd wanted to take it one step further and say, well, what about the 424? And but we understand about the baby steps, as Ian said. We've both been in public office before, so we understand you got to take those baby steps. But we're basically saying, look, get on with the job.
Yeah, you got to. This has been talked about. I've lived in town for 40 years. It's been talked about for longer than 40 years. So the time is now. I mean, there's a lot of trade that goes on in that corridor. Take some of the pressure off the 401. There's all kinds of reasons that support business, but more than anything, it's an issue about creating jobs between the two communities.
Absolutely.
And I think that there's no doubt that because of the bad corridor there, it has hindered what could be potential improvements or increases in the local economy.
Guys, let me know this. Let's hypothetically say that those resolutions, both of them, Highway 7 and the appointment of a manufacturing minister, for lack of a better word, let's say they're adopted. What happens after that? The Ontario Chamber would then advocate on behalf of all of your...
Absolutely.
Where would they take that?
Well,
who do they advocate to?
I think from our perspective, what we would do is we would jump on this. We would get on our saddles right away at the Ontario Chamber and say, we want this at the forefront of your discussions with the Premier going forward. And I think, what you have to understand as well, independently, our two chambers are number 1 and number 2 in size in the province of Ontario. So we're going to absolutely get on there with our collective voice and say, we've got to get this done.
Well, I can tell you, if you guys can present your resolutions together in person, you'll get their attention. I can tell you that right now.
We're good-looking guys.
Face for radio.
You're listening to Business to Business with Greg DeRocher, President and CEO of the Cambridge Chamber of Commerce, and Ian McLean, President and CEO of the Greater Kitchener-Waterloo Chamber of Commerce. When we come back, Greg and Ian will chat with John Tory, and they're going to get into it regarding the Drummond Report. What's good about it? Is there anything bad about the Drummond Report? What does the Chamber think of it? What does Mr. Tory think of it? Don't go away. This is Business to Business on 570 News.
We'll be right back with more Business to Business. The phone lines are open. Call in with your questions at star 570, 570-2545, or toll free at 1-800-570-5715. More of Business to Business right after this on 570 News.
Still interested in coming, but that's a real coup to come to have, and I think that speaks to the importance of the business community in Kitchener-Waterloo and Cambridge. That they, I think it's the first time I can recall he's spoken outside of a provincial or federal or the national capital. So we're very fortunate to have some of those great speakers, which bring a broader perspective, but also of the national and international economies, but drawing the connection here to why it's important for the local economy.
And Greg, you've got a lot going on at the Cambridge Chamber as well.
Oh boy, it just
Very
never
busy.
stops, Glenn. But that's the way we like it, right? We like the 12 to 14-hour days. But as far as business leaders and business speakers, we have coming up Paul Strauss, actually, the president of Home Hardware, on April the 3rd. So he'll be addressing and talking about his business, of course, Home Hardware, which is very prominent in this area, but also giving some advice to the small business owners as well. So we like our busy lives.
I want to point out as well that we are webcasting tonight's program, and we're going to continue to do that with the subsequent programs of Business to Business. So we're being webcast right now. If you want to see that Ian does have a face for radio, you can check us out.
I was saying that Greg had a face for radio.
You can check us out at 570news.com, www.570news.com.
That's why Ian dressed up so well for this.
That's right.
Yes, very good.
We want to get into the Drummond report, and Mr. Tory was scheduled to call.
Yeah, I think he's on his way to the airport, or may be on a plane, so hopefully he'll be calling in.
All right, but let's get into it. This raised a lot of eyebrows. Don Drummond, the former chief economist of the TD Bank, retired from that particular post and took on an assignment at the behest of the Premier to examine the province's finances and make some recommendations as to how the province could whittle away at its massive, I believe it's $16 billion deficit. And he didn't hold back. 362 recommendations. Your reaction in general to the Drummond report, was he on the mark?
Well, I think from my perspective, I think it really spoke to saying if it's dramatic, or if dramatic action is not taken, we're going to have a $30 billion deficit in 2017, and I think we've got John about to come on. I see you waving your arms, so you can see.
Yes. All right, do we have Mr. Tory with us?
Yes, sir, gentlemen. Congratulations on the new program.
Thank you.
I think it's this kind of discussion. I don't know that it's happening very many places, especially on the matter of the province's finances, which of course have a lot to do with it being an attractive place to invest.
Well, John, you're with Ian McLean of the Greater Kitchener-Waterloo Chamber of Commerce and Greg DeRocher of the Cambridge Chamber of Commerce. Delighted to have you. Gentlemen, take it away.
Well, John, we appreciate you taking the time to join us. And I was just saying, we've read the report. I know you're intimately familiar with it, but I guess the real question I have is, your initial thoughts on they have the mandate and approach that was given to Mr. Drummond. What's your reaction to the 362 recommendations, and in particular, since the province has immediately said that all-day kindergarten is still something they're going to invest in, that creates a bigger hole than the recommendations even approach to or try and address.
Yeah, I still believe that what they should be doing with all-day kindergarten, as an example, is one of the things Mr. Drummond recommended, which is not canceling it. I actually am a supporter of the principle of doing it, but slowing down the implementation, slowing down the staffing. But your point is well taken. They said from the beginning, Mr. Drummond said, that if they cherry pick on this, where they take the sort of the politically easy recommendations in his report, the vast majority of which I thought was very sensible, then, they're going to simply have to find the money somewhere else, because the math that he does, I didn't hear too many people arguing with, and I heard you just talking about it before I came on, that we're going to have a $30 billion deficit in Ontario if we don't do anything. And, of course, if you do half of what he recommends, then you'll have, say, a $15 billion deficit, which would represent not much progress from where we are today. So I just think, the government is making some of the right noises. Some of what you heard this week when it came to flack from the teachers' unions was in response to the government, I think, arguing the right kind of thing, which is a wage pause for teachers and getting rid of some of these things we just can't afford anymore, like sick days. I wholeheartedly, as a free enterpriser and a supporter of business as you are, said that the business subsidies, which now total about $3 billion a year, spread across 9 different government departments, 44 different programs, they should start over again. We all know, all 4 of us here on this program, and all the listeners do too, that when you have 9 government ministries and 44 different programs involved, the chances of there being massive duplication, overlap, and inefficiency in how that $3 billion is handed out is about 100%. Yeah. So, I just think that I really hope Mr. McGuinty has the wherewithal to, I was going to use another expression. But
That's okay, we're a friendly group here.
Yeah, to actually do this stuff, because it doesn't matter whether you're liberal or conservative or New Democrat. This needs to be done because this province has got problems, and it's a great place. It's a great place to invest. It's got a wonderful workforce. But if we're forced in the future to have massively higher taxes to pay off this deficit or even just to pay the interest charges, well, then that will be no longer the case. So I hope he acts, and acts soon.
You're listening to Business on 570 News. Our guest is John Tory. And we have in studio with us Greg DeRocher from the Cambridge Chamber of Commerce, where he is president and CEO, and Ian McLean, president and CEO of the Greater Kitchener-Waterloo Chamber of Commerce. And we're continuing our discussion with Mr. Tory.
John, it's Greg DeRocher here from the Cambridge Chamber of Commerce. My question is more about the immediate reaction of the opposition. And we heard Andrea Horwath came right out of the gate and talked about the rollback or the stopping of the rollback of the corporate taxes. And I think I tried to remind Ms. Horwath that we didn't get into this mess because we don't pay enough taxes. We got into this mess because government spends too much money. They admittedly, right in the Drummond report, was Ontario government has over 13 million shareholders who do not want their government to run deficits and believe they already pay enough taxes. What's your take on the fact that, obviously I think the Liberal government, McGuinty's going to be saying, I've got a friend if I don't tamper with these taxes, if I keep them stable or I freeze the rollback. What's your take on that?
Well, I'd rather not see the rollback frozen or interfered with, because I think we were headed in the right direction in terms of having the most competitive corporate tax rates in the world, which, if you combine the efforts of the federal and provincial governments in Ontario and Ottawa, that obviously is one factor, as you both know, and as the listeners know, in people's decision to invest and create jobs. If I would, though, as a commentator, as somebody who's been in politics and understand the art of the possible, say, well, look, if I could see you for real implement 100, like right off the bat, 100. I don't mean like 3 years from now or 3 months from now, but I mean like at the time of the budget at the end of March, 100 of Mr. Drummond's recommendations, if not more. Then I might be prepared to see you say for a year they would have a pause. Because there's just no question that as you give up revenue, it makes it a little harder to balance the books. But the notion to me that we're going to sort of stop these tax decreases, which were put in place for sound public policy and economic reasons, and not move ahead to smartly implement a great many of the Drummond recommendations, will be really just falling prey to the same lack of courage that we've had a whole bunch of other times under all parties, quite frankly. And so I just think it is, I would rather not see the pause, but if it has to happen in order to balance the books by 2017 and is accompanied by a big whack of Drummond recommendations that take a big whack out of the spending, as you say, then I guess I wouldn't get myself too upset about it, as long as there's a pause and it's for a very short period of time.
Now, John, you were here this week, and I had the pleasure of hearing you at the Capacity Waterloo Region event, where you spoke about empowering community groups and others to and all the good work they do to provide services in our communities. So one of the things that we sort of leads me to think about is, what are some of the programs that government just should be out of entirely? Because one of the things I think the Drummond report, any of us that have been in government have to try and balance the books, is the across the board cuts are generally not the way to do it, because it's not very strategic, and it can, you can throw the baby out with the bathwater. But it's very difficult to cut a program entirely because it's very difficult to do for elected officials. But do you have are there a couple of things where you said, geez, if you really just didn't do that, the private sector or not-for-profits or service groups could get in there and do that? I think you spoke about that in your speech, and I'm just interested if you can share with the listeners what your take on that would be.
I'll start with one of the things Mr. Drummond made reference to, which was the increased involvement of the private sector in the delivery of health care. And I know this is controversial. In fact, I ran on it, and if I hadn't picked several even more controversial matters to bog myself down with in 2007, I might have won the election. But having said that, I ran on a bunch of things that I thought were sensible, including the ability of the private sector to play a greater role in the delivery of publicly financed healthcare services. And this is what Mr. Drummond talks about as well. So for the listeners, before they get all sort of wound up and start throwing their radio out the window, it is simply saying that you could walk into a clinic, for example, and have your cataract surgery done or have your knee replaced if there was somebody who set up a clinic and ran it as a private sector concern, but you would pay with your health card. So there is no money out of anybody's pocket. There is no no Visa card asked for. There are no extra charges. It is simply allowing a group of doctors, for example, to set up a clinic and decide they can do these knee replacements really well and make a profit and do it for the same fee from the government that the public hospital gets. Why is this a good idea? Well, because I think it'll set up some competition for what is today a monopoly public healthcare system, which is monopolies are never good unless you have them, but they don't spur a lot of innovation and so on. Secondly, I think it will allow people a degree of choice, and I think all of this will produce a more efficient delivery of healthcare services. So that's one Mr. Drummond himself recommends. Many other people have talked about it, but of course in Canada and in Ontario it's a lightning rod, and it could fall prey to being one of the other recommendations Mr. McGuinty kind of rules out before he even thinks about it, though I don't think so. I look at things, gents, like as well like home care and say a lot of it is now delivered by nonprofits, and I would say as long as the standards are kept high, I would like to see even more of that contracted out, just because I'll be candid about this. I mean, either that or the public sector unions have to sort of come to give themselves more of a reality check, because where we're going broke in that side of things is paying for the very generous pensions, the incredible provisions like these sick day banking things the teachers have, where they get to have 20 sick days per year, which seems like a lot to me, and then on top of that they get to bank them till the end of their career and get a big check when they leave. Nobody else has that in the private sector, as we know, and we can't afford to pay for it anymore. I mean, we just can't. And I don't blame the teachers for this, because some school boards gave it to them years ago, and so it takes two. It's an employer and an employee to get these things, but we can't afford them anymore. And if some of that were to be dealt with, then maybe you could afford to have public employees delivering more of these services. But as long as they're so incredibly expensive, billions of dollars in liabilities, $1.7 billion right now, liabilities to the taxpayers of Ontario just for the sick days banked by teachers. That's it. That's the number, $1.7 billion.
All right, we're going to come back with more. If you can stay on the line briefly, John, we thank you so much for your time. John Tory, former leader of the Progressive Conservative Party of Ontario, is our guest, and you're listening to Business with Greg DeRocher and Ian McLean, presidents of the Cambridge and Greater Kitchener-Waterloo Chambers of Commerce. We're coming back with more right after this. This is Business to Business on 570 News.
Business to Business, presented by 570 News. Watch the live video webcast at 570news.com. We'll return with more Business to Business, connecting community through business. To Business, featuring local business, solutions, and success stories, connecting community through business, here on 570 News.
Welcome back. I'm Glenn Pelletier, and our regular featured guests, Greg DeRocher and Ian McLean, president of the Cambridge and Greater KW Chambers of Commerce. Our guest is John Tory, the former leader of the Ontario Progressive Conservative Party, the former chair or the commissioner of the CFL, a man who is highly regarded for his political and business acumen. And we thank you so much for your time, John. We know you have to catch a flight. So one more question, and we're going to throw it over to you, Greg.
John, I guess in my old age I'm becoming increasingly cynical about things and politicians, but I can't understand hiring an individual with the depth and breadth of a Don Drummond to open up the books and say, give us your best advice, making sure you spread the pain as much as possible. If John Tory was premier of this province, how many of the 362 recommendations would he adopt?
I didn't count, but I would have said about 350, because I literally read through it and thought it made eminent sense. And some of these things are tough to do, no question. But having said that, we have a very simple choice here. We're either going to stop living beyond our means, and we'll get the province back on top and get it going again as a really attractive place to invest and get its finances in order, or we won't. And if we don't, then you know what happens. I mean, it's the same as what happens to a household or a small business if you keep spending more than you're taking in. In the case of a province, you won't go broke, but you will get your credit rating will slowly be eroded. As you borrow more and more money, it will be more and more expensive. And then when interest rates shoot up, we will go into some kind of a Greek-type situation. I mean, Don Drummond said at his news conference, Ontario was about where Greece was in 1984. Mm-hmm. And in Greece in 1984, if they'd implemented a bunch of the kinds of things he recommended, then they wouldn't be where they are today, which is broke. So I just would have implemented a good part of it, and I'd like to see, one of the things I said is I'd like to see Dalton McGuinty inviting Tim Hudak and Andrea Horvath into his office and at least start by saying, okay, which of these can the three of us all agree upon? Because I'm sure there must be. I would be completely depressed if there weren't 75 recommendations out of 350 that they could all agree on and say, like, fine, let's implement those right away. But you don't see that happening anymore. It's evidence of the system being so badly broken, the political system, that people won't work together, even when Ontario's in what I would argue is, not quite a crisis, but getting there.
Well, thanks, John. We really appreciate you coming on our first show and sharing your insights with our leaders. And
well, I'm happy to come again. I hope business people, I know they do. I don't think it's business people that are the problem here. I think they recognize how serious our situation is. I think it's a lot of other people. Everybody wants somebody else down the street to make the sacrifice, and it's one of the reasons why I'm not 100% opposed to pause on the corporate tax reductions if a whole bunch of other people are making sacrifices too. But it isn't business that are the problem. They know this stuff is common sense, but it's a lot of other people that have to sort of suck it up, if you'll pardon the expression, and say we'll take a little bit of a sacrifice on things so that we can get this province back to where it belongs.
John, thank you for your time.
Thank you, gents.
Good.
Have a good day. Great. Congrats on the show again.
Thanks, John.
Bye for now.
What a class act, John Tory, who, by the way, got his first taste of radio sitting in this chair that I'm sitting in right now. We are very proud to have given John his start in radio, and he's just a delight and really knows his stuff. Let's get back to the Drummond Report, and then we'll talk a bit about what some of the events that you have coming up at your Chambers of Commerce. Are there 3 or 4 or more recommendations by Mr. Drummond that you would like to see implemented, that you see as key? Because there are, we've said 362. But of the top 5 or 6, which ones would you put in that category?
Well, I think John mentioned it. You can't do anything without addressing the fundamental recommendations around healthcare and education. That's what 70% of the budget. So you got to address some of those, whether it's on the service delivery side, how you're going about it. But the one for me that our chamber has since for a year now has been really on is labor arbitration, and how those agreements and labor settlements really drive the cost for government. And it's not just municipal governments, it's governments right across, the provincial and municipal governments. For me, I was a little surprised at his comment saying he doesn't think it's broken. It just needs to be, there needs to be some modifications or some changes, but, and that the unions will understand how difficult the environment is right now. I personally think that the system is broken. I think it does drive when you look through the report, 60% plus are in wages. So settlements, your labor agreements are going to drive, and what we keep hearing from our members over the last through the provincial and the federal election is, boy, we've had most of my employees and myself had 0% increase for probably 3-4 years. So to many in business that are paying the freight, they really have some questions around how that system works, and it's a complicated issue, and it takes some time to discuss.
It's going to be fun to watch how the premier sells this, because it's a political football.
Sure, but one of the things I think we're prepared to do is to say the call that probably should have come out 2-3 years ago. At least he's saying it now, which is putting this on notice. Everybody, doctors, nurses, teachers, everybody, that we all are in this together, and everyone's going to have to put a little water in their wine.
The average consumer dealing with even their household debt can relate to something, can relate to governments and business, being indebted, and we see the value in getting ourselves out of debt. I think there is a collective will to solve this problem.
Yeah, I think my answer is even simpler. Adopt all 362 and let's get on with it. That's what you would have to do in your home. If things get tight, you can't pay it anymore. If you're paying your grocery bill with a credit card and leaving it on there, you got to make some changes.
Okay, guys, we have just a little bit to go here. A couple of events at both of your chambers that are coming up that you'd like people to know about.
Well, we've got, as you said, Barry Verbanovic speaking this week on the importance of infrastructure, and he's the president of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, as well as being a city councillor here. And then we have at April 2nd, as I said, the governor of the Bank of Canada coming, and we expect over 450 people in the room. So those are two things that we're really excited about. I know leader cast.
We have a couple of exciting things that we're working together with as chambers of commerce as well. One is Centralia. It's a business-to-business conference.
Sorry, was that
Centralia?
Centralia?
And you can see it at centralia.com. Okay. And it's a very interesting business-to-business conference that's happening in the fall. Ian and I are hosting our colleague from the Winnipeg Chamber of Commerce on March the 14th at our office, the Cambridge Chamber office at 8 o'clock in the morning. Information session for small enterprises to come and have a look at how you can do business globally and internationally. And as well, we'll be talking about this a lot in the next show in April, LeaderCast, the Save on Energy LeaderCast, actually, where we're going to have a day of motivation and inspiration. And we have our Business Excellence Awards on March 22nd, but they're sold out, Glenn. Sorry. I know you really wanted to come, but
we can make room for you.
Sit in my lap. I'd love to be there. I was there for the Greater KW, and what a great night it was.
Well, you should come and sit on Ian's lap.
Very quickly, I want to give the two websites, www.cambridgechamber.com. That's cambridgechamber.com. Get to it, check it out, find out what they're doing, and the Greater KW Chambers is greaterkwchamber.com, greaterkwchamber.com. Thank you, guys.
This was a lot of fun. This is podcast too, right? This is
webcast, as well as podcast.
So you can see this.
And we have more shows coming out throughout the year. This is our debut edition of Business to Business, but we are going to be doing this with regularity on 570 News. Guys, this was a lot of fun.
This is great. Thank you.
Greg DeRocher, Ian McLean. This has been Business to Business on 570 News.
What a way to make a living! Drayton Entertainment's own Alex Mustaka stars in 9 to 5, the musical.